The nightmare always started the same way: sand and fire. The crack of AK-47s echoing off mud brick walls in Kandahar province. 6 men moving through the compound, brothers, in everything but blood, and then the world exploding into chaos. Lucas Brennan could see their faces even now, 5 years later. Could hear Mitchell's laugh cut short by the sniper's bullet. Could feel the heat of the explosion that took Hansen and Rodriguez in a single awful instant. And Rhodes. Always Rhodes. The German Shepherd had been barely a year old then, all lean muscle and fierce loyalty, trained to detect explosives before they could kill. The dog had frozen mid-step ears, pinned back body rigid with warning. But the intel had been good, the CIA contact had been certain. No explosives in the building. Just a high-value target waiting for extraction. The contact had been wrong, or worse, had been bought. Rhodes had tried to pull Lucas back, had actually grabbed his vest in those powerful jaws and tugged hard enough to make Lucas stumble. And in that stumble, in that half-second delay, the first blast had gone off 20 feet ahead instead of right under Lucas's boots. The ceiling collapsed. Fire bloomed. Men screamed. Lucas had crawled through the rubble, bleeding from a dozen places, calling names that would never answer again. And Rhodes had found him there, trapped under a fallen beam, insurgents closing in for the kill. The dog had stood over him, snarling with a fury that Lucas had never seen before or since, holding off 3 armed men until the extraction team arrived. The shrapnel had caught Rhodes in the left rear leg. The vet at Bagram said the dog would never work again. Medical retirement, full honors, a loyal animal who had given everything and received a discharge paper in return. Lucas had taken him home. Where else would either of them go now, 5 years later? Lucas jolted awake in the darkness of his Colorado cabin. His hand reached automatically for the pistol under his pillow before his mind caught up with his training. No gunfire, no screams, just the wind howling against the windows and the steady sound of Rhodes breathing from his spot beside the bed. The dog's amber eyes reflected the faint moonlight. Watching. Always watching. "I'm good," Lucas said quietly. "Just ghosts." Rhodes's tail thumped once against the floor. The dog understood ghosts. He had his own. Lucas swung his legs out of bed and sat there for a moment, letting his heart rate settle. 3:47 in the morning. Too late to call it night, too early to call it morning. The hours when the past pressed closest and the future seemed furthest away. He stood and moved to the window. Snow had started falling sometime after midnight, thick and heavy, the kind that would make the mountain roads impassable by dawn. Good. The fewer people who could reach him, the better. The cabin was small, but solid. One room that served as bedroom, kitchen, and living space. A wood stove in the corner that kept the worst of the cold at bay. A workbench along one wall covered with radio equipment, transceivers, frequency analyzers, circuit boards in various states of repair. The work kept his hands busy and brought in enough money to buy food and pay the minimal utilities. It was enough. It had to be enough. Rhodes rose from his bed and stretched the old injury, making him favor the left rear leg for just a moment before his weight settled. The dog moved to the door and sat perfectly still, perfectly alert. Lucas knew that posture. "What is it, boy?" Rhodes's ears rotated forward, listening to something Lucas's merely human senses couldn't detect yet. Then Lucas heard it too. A vehicle. Coming up the access road that supposedly didn't exist, that wasn't on any map, that only the county maintenance crew was supposed to know about. His hand moved to the pistol he'd retrieved from beside the bed. Rhodes remained motionless, a statue carved from muscle and loyalty and fierce intelligence. The engine sound changed, slowing down, stopping. 2 doors opening and closing, muffled by the wind and snow. Footsteps on the wooden porch steps. Heavy, unsteady. Someone struggling with weight or injury. Rhodes's growl built low in his chest. Not aggressive, aware. Lucas moved to the side window and used his knuckle to clear a small circle in the condensation. Through the gap, he could make out 2 figures on his porch. One supporting the other, both soaked through from the storm. The first figure raised something toward the window. A badge. Lucas studied them for 3 more seconds. The woman was young, maybe late 20s, her dark hair plastered to her face. The man beside her was bigger, older, and his head was bleeding. Fresh blood bright against the pale skin of his face. Neither of them moved like they were setting up an ambush. They moved like people who had run out of choices. "Please," the woman's voice was strained, desperate. "We need help." Lucas's jaw tightened. This was exactly what he'd come to these mountains to escape. Other people's wars, other people's problems, other people's lives depending on decisions he might get wrong. Rhodes looked up at him. Those amber eyes held something that might have been judgment or might have been understanding. Hard to tell with dogs. They saw the world in simpler terms than humans did. Threat or not threat, pack or not pack, help or walk away. The woman knocked again. 3 rapid strikes that rattled the door against its frame. Lucas made his decision. He crossed to the door and unbolted it, opening it 6 inches with his body angled behind the frame. The cold hit him immediately, wind driving snow into the cabin. State your business. The woman held up her badge again. Her hand trembled. Detective Isabel Hart, Colorado State Police, badge number 4827. This is Sergeant Thomas Wade. Our vehicle was ambushed 2 miles east. Radio's dead. We've got men pursuing us and nowhere else to go. Lucas looked at the man. Wade's eyes were glassy, unfocused. Blood ran freely from a gash above his left ear, mixing with rain and melting snow on his collar. His breathing came shallow and fast. Shock, maybe. Concussion, definitely. How many pursuing? 3 that I saw, maybe more. Armed. Rhodes's growl deepened. His head swung toward the tree line, ears rotating like satellite dishes, picking up a distant signal. Lucas had spent 15 years learning to read Rhodes's body language. The dog was tracking multiple positions at once. The woman had said 3. Rhodes was counting at least 4. Another one had joined them while they were talking. Inside, Lucas said. Now, move slow. Detective Hart half-carried Wade through the doorway. Lucas closed the door behind them and threw all 3 bolts. Then he killed the main lamp, dropping the cabin into shadows broken only by the wood stove's orange glow. Sit him there. Lucas pointed to a chair near the heat. Don't touch anything else. Hart guided Wade into the chair. The sergeant slumped forward, pressing his palm against the wound on his head. His uniform was torn at the shoulder and caked with mud. When he lifted his hand, Lucas could see the blood wasn't clotting properly. The wound gaped deep and ugly. Thank you, Hart breathed. God, thank you. Don't thank me yet. Lucas moved to a cabinet and retrieved a first aid kit. Rhodes, watch. The German shepherd positioned himself facing the door, body low, every muscle coiled and ready. His amber eyes never blinked. Hart stared at the dog. He's trained. Former military working dog, Lucas said. 3 tours in Afghanistan before he took shrapnel and got medically retired. He knows what hunting sounds like. Lucas knelt in front of Wade and examined the head wound. The sergeant's eyes tried to focus on him and failed. How long ago did this happen? Maybe 30 minutes. Hart's voice cracked. They hit us from both sides. Ran us off the ridge road. Tom got thrown when we rolled. You rolled the vehicle into a ravine. It caught fire. We barely got out. Lucas cleaned the wound with practiced efficiency. The gash was deep but clean. Wade would need stitches eventually, but the immediate danger was shock and blood loss. He pressed a gauze pad into Hart's hand and guided it to the wound. Firm pressure. Don't let up. She nodded, her jaw tight with determination. Lucas stood and crossed to his equipment table. An array of radio equipment sat there, handheld units, a spectrum analyzer, a laptop showing waveform patterns. He picked up his most sensitive scanner and powered it on. The needle twitched once, then flatlined. That's not right, he said quietly. What is it? Your radio didn't die because of the storm. He adjusted the frequency. Tried again. Same result. Someone's jamming communications in this area. Military-grade suppression. Hart's face went pale. That's not possible. Drug runners don't have that kind of equipment. Lucas turned to look at her. Who said anything about drug runners? The silence stretched. Rhodes's ears swiveled toward the back of the cabin. His growl returned, softer now but more insistent. We weren't tracking drug runners, Hart said finally. Her voice dropped. We were investigating something else. What? She hesitated, looked at Wade, who had closed his eyes and was breathing through clenched teeth. Women have been disappearing from the small towns around here. 6 in the past 4 months. Young women. Vulnerable women. Nobody was looking for them because nobody thought they mattered. Lucas felt something cold settle in his chest. Human trafficking. We found evidence that they're using the old mining tunnels to move victims. Tom and I were the only ones willing to push the investigation. Tonight we got close. Too close. How close? We found the entrance. An abandoned mine called Blackwell Shaft, maybe 8 miles from here. We saw vehicles, armed guards. Her voice broke. And then they were behind us, like they knew exactly where we'd be. Rhodes suddenly barked, sharp and urgent. Once, twice. Lucas was at the window in 2 strides. Through the rain, barely visible against the tree line, a flashlight beam swept across the forest floor. Then another. Then a third. They're here, he said. Hart's hand went to her sidearm. How many? 3 lights. Could be more without. We need to call for backup. There has to be some way to... The jamming extends at least 2 miles, Lucas said. He was already moving, pulling items from a closet, a tactical vest, a pair of night vision binoculars, a hunting knife that had seen use in places he didn't talk about. Probably further, whoever these people are, they came prepared. Wade stirred in the chair. Hart. She was at his side instantly. Tom, stay still. My badge. His words came slurred but urgent. Check my badge. What? When they ran us off the road, one of them said something. Said they always knew where I was. Said he winced, hand pressing harder against his wound. Said the department takes care of its own. Hart's face drained of color. Tom, that doesn't make any sense. Check the badge. Her hands shook as she unclipped the shield from his belt. She turned it over, examined the back, ran her fingers along the edges. There's nothing here. Just... She stopped. Her thumbnail had caught on something. A tiny seam in the metal backing that shouldn't have been there. Lucas handed her the hunting knife. Open it. She pried at the seam. The back panel of the badge popped off, revealing a hollow space underneath. Inside, a device the size of a hearing aid battery blinked with a faint red light. GPS tracker, Lucas said grimly. Embedded in a sheriff's badge. That's not something criminals do. That's something institutions do. Hart stared at the blinking light like it had personally betrayed her. They knew. The whole time we were investigating, they knew exactly where we were. Who issued that badge? The department. Standard issue when Tom made sergeant last year. Then someone in your department, Lucas said slowly, is part of this operation. The flashlight beams outside had stopped moving. They held steady now, pointed at the cabin from 3 different angles. They're not searching anymore, Hart whispered. They're surrounding us. Lucas disabled the tracker with a quick twist that crushed its circuitry. He dropped the destroyed device on the floor and looked at Hart with eyes that had seen situations exactly this hopeless before. Detective Hart, in the next few minutes we're going to find out how badly these people want you dead. I need to know right now, is there anything else you haven't told me? Hart's chin lifted, despite the fear in her eyes. We found a ledger, financial records connecting the trafficking operation to someone inside law enforcement. Names, dates, payments. I photographed every page before we ran. The evidence is on my phone. Where's the phone now? Waterproof case. Inside pocket. Then they're not here to kill you, Lucas said. He checked the window again. The lights hadn't moved. They're here to recover that evidence. Killing you is just the cleanup afterward. Rhodes's bark came again, more urgent. He was pacing now, moving from the door to the back wall and back again. Something outside had him tracking multiple positions at once. Lucas knelt beside the dog and placed his hand on Rhodes's broad shoulder. He felt the tension vibrating through every muscle. How many, boys? Show me. Rhodes moved to the front door and held, then to the east window, then the rear wall, 4 distinct positions before returning to center. 4 now, Lucas said. Another one joined them while we were talking. Hart's hand tightened on her weapon. What do? We don't panic. Panic is what gets people killed. Lucas stood and faced her directly. I've been in worse situations than this. I've been in situations where everyone around me died and I had to keep moving anyway. The only difference between the people who survive and the people who don't is decision-making under pressure. Do you understand? Yes. Your sergeant needs medical attention you can't give him here. These men outside want evidence that will put powerful people in prison. And somewhere out there are women who have been taken from their families and are waiting for someone to find them. He paused. That's what we're fighting for tonight. Not just ourselves, them too. A sharp crack echoed from outside, not gunfire wood splitting under pressure. Someone was testing the integrity of the rear wall. Wade forced himself more upright in the chair. Color was returning to his face as adrenaline overrode his injury. I spent 24 years believing in that badge, he said hoarsely. Believing it meant something. And now you're telling me the same people I trusted. He trailed off, swallowing hard. The badge is a piece of metal, Lucas said. It doesn't mean anything by itself. The only thing that matters is what the person wearing it chooses to do. Another crack from outside, closer to the corner this time. They're probing for weak points, Lucas continued. Standard technique. Apply pressure at multiple positions. See where the defensive breaks first. How do you know that? Hart asked. Because I used to be the one doing it. Hart processed that information in silence. When she spoke again, her voice had steadied. What's the plan? First, we need to understand what we're dealing with. Lucas moved to his equipment table and retrieved a small device, a parabolic microphone connected to a headset. They've jammed our transmissions, but they're still talking to each other. Radio discipline in civilian operations is usually sloppy. He cracked the window just enough to extend the microphone's dish toward the tree line. Static filled the headset for a moment, then resolved into voices. In position, package confirmed inside. 2 plus the homeowner. Copy, what about the dog? Big German Shepherd, looks alert, could be a problem. Then remove the problem first. Silent approach. Window breach on my signal. Lucas pulled back the microphone. His face had gone very still. They know we're here. They know about roads, and they're planning to breach through the windows in a coordinated assault. When soon, they're just waiting for confirmation from their leader. Rhodes had stopped pacing. He stood rigid near the door, a deep, continuous growl rolling from his chest. He understood the tone in those voices, even if he couldn't parse the words. He knew the sound of men preparing to do violence. There's something else, Lucas said. The voice giving orders, I recognize the radio protocol. It's law enforcement tactical communication. These aren't hired criminals. They're trained officers. Hart's weapon rose instinctively. Officers, deputies. Maybe. State Patrol. I can't tell which agency, but they've had tactical training. They know how to clear a building. They know how to neutralize threats. Then how do we fight them? We don't. Lucas crossed to a cabinet near the back wall and pulled out a backpack already loaded with supplies. Not directly. There's too many of them and they're too well trained. Our only advantage is that they think this is a containment operation. They're expecting scared civilians waiting to be captured. They're not expecting someone who knows their playbook. He handed the backpack to Hart. There's a game trail behind the cabin that leads down to Cooper Creek. Follow the water northwest for half a mile, and you'll hit the old logging road. Cell service picks up about a mile past that point. Hart stared at him. You want us to run? I want you to survive. You have evidence that can expose this entire operation. That evidence is worthless if you're dead. I'm not leaving you here alone. You're not leaving me. Lucas whistled softly and Rhodes immediately moved to his side. Rhodes is going with you. He knows these woods better than any of those men out there. He'll get you to safety. Wade struggled to his feet, swaying but determined. She's right. We don't leave people behind. That's not how we do things. Sergeant, with respect, you can barely stand, Lucas said. His voice was matter-of-fact, not cruel. You'll slow her down and get both of you killed. The best thing you can do right now is stay here with me and make noise. Let them think both targets are still in the cabin, while Detective Hart runs alone in the dark with a combat-trained German Shepherd who has pulled wounded operators out of Taliban territory. Lucas met Wade's eyes. I would trust him with my life. I have trusted him with my life. He won't let anything happen to her. A new sound came from outside. Multiple footsteps moving in coordinated patterns, spreading wider around the cabin's perimeter. We're out of time, Lucas said. Detective Hart Bell, you need to go now. Hart looked at Wade. The sergeant's face was pale, streaked with blood and rain, but his eyes were clear. Go, he said. Get that evidence to someone who can use it. Find out who did this to us. Tom, that's an order. He tried to smile and almost managed it. I'm still your supervising officer for another few hours. Don't make me write you up. Hart's eyes glistened, but she nodded. She gripped her phone through her jacket pocket, feeling the weight of the evidence she carried. Rhodes. Lucas pointed to Hart. Guard. Escort. Go. The German Shepherd moved to Hart's side without hesitation. He pressed against her legs, solid and warm, his presence a promise. Lucas pulled open the back door just wide enough for them to slip through. Wind and rain rushed in, carrying the smell of wet pine and churned earth. Stay low. Stay quiet. Follow Rhodes, Lucas said. He'll know if anyone's close before you do. Hart stepped into the darkness. At the threshold, she turned back. What's your name? I never asked. Lucas Brennan. Thank you, Lucas. Thank me when this is over. She disappeared into the storm. Rhodes's dark form moved beside her, barely visible, against the trees, guiding her downslope toward the creek. Lucas closed the door and turned to face Wade. Can you hold a weapon? I can try. Lucas retrieved a shotgun from a locked case and pressed it into the sergeant's hands. 12 gauge, 5 rounds loaded, safety here. Point it at anything that comes through that door and pull the trigger. What are you going to do? Buy them time. Lucas picked up a metal pot from the kitchen and hurled it against the far wall. The crash echoed through the cabin. He followed it by knocking over a chair, stomping across the floorboards, creating chaos and noise. Outside, the movement stopped. The hunters had heard the commotion. They would be reassessing, recalculating. Good. Every second they hesitated was another second Hart gained. Hey, Lucas shouted toward the window. I know you're out there. You want to talk, or are you planning to stand in the rain all night? Silence. Then a voice called back, amplified by a bullhorn. Lucas Brennan, former Navy SEAL, honorably discharged 2019. We know who you are. We know you've got our targets inside. Send them out, and you can go back to your quiet little life up here. Nobody needs to get hurt. Lucas smiled grimly. They'd done their homework. Probably ran his plates or his utility records as soon as they realized where their targets had gone. And if I don't, then we come in and take them, and you become a tragic casualty of a home invasion gone wrong. Your choice. Wade's hands tightened on the shotgun. They're going to kill us anyway. Once they have the evidence, they can't leave witnesses. I know, Lucas said, but they don't know Hart's gone yet. As long as they think both of you are still in here, they'll try to contain the situation. They want this clean, professional, bodies that tell a simple story. So what do? We make it messy. Lucas picked up the destroyed tracker from the floor and held it up to the window, making sure it caught what little light remained. Looking for this, bad news, your GPS is offline. You'll have to do this the hard way. A long pause. Then the bullhorn crackled again. You've got 60 seconds to open that door. Or what? You'll huff and puff. 45 seconds. Lucas turned to Wade. When they breach, they'll come through the windows first. Flashbangs or smoke to disorient, then entry team through the front. Stay low, behind the stove. It's cast iron. It'll stop most rounds. You've done this before. Too many times. 30 seconds. Lucas moved to the corner where darkness pooled deepest and pressed his back against the wall. In his hand, the hunting knife reflected no light at all. 15 seconds. Outside, Rhodes's growl had faded into the distance. Hart was moving. She was running. She had a chance. Lucas closed his eyes for just a moment and let himself remember why he'd come to this mountain in the first place. To escape the violence, to find peace, to stop being the weapon other people pointed at their problems. But some things couldn't be run from. Some fights came to you whether you wanted them or not. Time's up. Glass shattered. The night exploded into chaos. And somewhere in the darkness below, a woman ran for her life with a faithful dog guiding her through the storm, carrying evidence that could burn an empire of evil to the ground. Glass exploded inward as two windows shattered simultaneously. Smoke canisters followed, spinning across the floor and filling the cabin with thick white clouds that burned Lucas's eyes and throat. He didn't panic. Panic was death. Lucas dropped low, pressing against the wall where the smoke hadn't reached yet. His ears tracked the sounds, boots hitting the porch, weight shifting against the doorframe, the metallic click of weapons being readied. "Way down," he shouted. The sergeant had already thrown himself behind the cast iron stove. The shotgun trembled in his grip, but his finger stayed off the trigger. Discipline. Good. The front door burst open. Two figures rushed through, moving in tactical formation, weapons sweeping the smoke-filled room. Lucas waited. Let them commit to their entry path. Let them think they owned the space. The first man passed within arm's reach. Lucas moved like water fluid, silent, inevitable. His arm snaked around the man's throat from behind, knife pressing against the tactical vest's gap at the collar. The second man spun, weapon rising, but Lucas had already repositioned his hostage as a shield. "Drop it," Lucas said calmly, "or your friend here learns what his jugular looks like. You're making a mistake." The second man's voice was steady, professional. "We have this place surrounded. You can't win." "I'm not trying to win. I'm trying to have a conversation." A third figure appeared in the doorway, taller than the others, moving with the confident authority of command. Even through the dissipating smoke, Lucas could make out the insignia on his tactical vest. Sheriff's Department, just as he'd suspected. "Stand down," the commander ordered his men. Then to Lucas, "You're Brennan Wright, the SEAL, former." "Once a SEAL, always a SEAL, that's what they say." The commander stepped fully into the cabin, hands visible but not raised. "I'm Captain Emmett Morrison, and I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot here. Your men just threw flashbangs into my home. I'd say we're well past wrong feet. A misunderstanding. We were told hostile forces had taken refuge here. We thought we were protecting you." "Protecting me?" Lucas laughed, a short, harsh sound. "Is that what you call hunting two police officers through the mountains?" Morrison's expression didn't change. "Detective Bart and Sergeant Wade are persons of interest in an ongoing investigation. They've stolen classified evidence and fled custody. We're here to bring them back safely. Safely. Wade's voice came from behind the stove, thick with anger and pain. You ran us off a cliff, Morrison. You tried to kill us. Sergeant Wade, Morrison turned toward the voice, his tone shifting to something that sounded almost like concern. You're injured. Let us help you. This doesn't have to escalate further. I saw your men's faces. I know who was driving that truck that hit us. You suffered head trauma. You're confused. I'm not confused. Wade struggled to his feet using the shotgun as a brace. Blood had soaked through the bandage on his head, but his eyes blazed with clarity. I'm finally seeing clearly for the first time in years. Lucas maintained his grip on the hostage, watching Morrison's micro-expressions. The man was calculating odds, measuring distances, deciding whether to push or pull back. Where's Detective Hart? Morrison asked quietly. Not here. The tracker shows. The tracker is in pieces on my floor. Lucas kicked the destroyed device toward Morrison's feet. Technology fails. You should know that. Something shifted in Morrison's eyes. The professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something colder underneath. Something desperate. Mr. Brennan, I'm going to be direct with you. Detective Hart is carrying evidence that could destroy lives. Good lives. People who have served this community for decades. People who traffic women, you mean? That's not... Morrison stopped himself, regrouped. This is more complicated than you understand. Then explain it to me. I can't do that. Can't or won't. Both. Morrison took a step forward. But I can tell you this. If that evidence reaches the wrong hands, people will die. Not criminals. Innocent people. Families. Children. Lucas felt the hostage tense in his grip. The man was getting ready to make a move, probably on Morrison's signal. That's quite a speech, Lucas said. You practice it on all your victims before you make them disappear. Morrison's jaw tightened. Last chance, Mr. Brennan. Tell us where Hart went and you can go back to your quiet life. Nobody needs to know you were involved. And Wade, Sergeant Wade will receive medical attention and a fair hearing. A fair hearing? Wade laughed bitterly. Like Sarah Vance Gott, like Maria Gonzalez. The names hit Morrison like a physical blow. His composure cracked visibly. How do you know those names? Because I've been investigating this operation for 6 months, Wade said. Because Bell found the ledger your people were stupid enough to keep. Every transaction, every name, every dollar that changed hands. Morrison's hand moved toward his sidearm. Lucas reacted instantly, shoving his hostage forward into Morrison and diving sideways. The cabin erupted into chaos. Shouts, struggling bodies, the crash of furniture overturning. Wade fired the shotgun into the ceiling. The blast was deafening, freezing everyone in place for one critical second. Next one goes through somebody, Wade roared. Everybody freeze. Morrison had his weapon drawn but not aimed. His hostage was on the floor, gasping. The second officer had retreated to the doorway, uncertain. Lucas recovered his footing, knife still in hand. Captain, I think you should leave now. This isn't over. It is for tonight. Your window for a clean operation just closed. You've got shots fired, witnesses, and your target is already gone. Cut your losses. Morrison's face contorted with barely suppressed rage, but he was smart enough to recognize the truth. Whatever he'd planned for this cabin, it had failed. You've just made yourself an enemy, Morrison said to Lucas. Both of you. There's nowhere in this state you can hide. I've had worse enemies than you. Not like this. Not with what we have at stake. Morrison signaled to his men. They retreated through the door, melting back into the storm. The sounds of their movement faded, replaced by wind and rain and the settling groans of the damaged cabin. Wade lowered the shotgun slowly. His arms were shaking, his face pale as chalk. Are they really gone? Lucas moved to the window, watching the flashlight beams retreat into the tree line. For now, they'll regroup. Try to track Hart. She's got a head start, maybe 20 minutes. Depends on how fast they can mobilize vehicles to cut her off. Wade slumped against the wall, sliding down until he sat on the floor. The shotgun clattered beside him. I can't believe it. Morrison, I've known him for 15 years. Our kids played Little League together. Lucas retrieved his first aid kit and knelt beside the sergeant. Hold still. Your bandage is soaked through. How does a man do that? Wade's voice was hollow. How does he smile at you across the barbecue while he's running a trafficking ring? Compartmentalization. Everybody's the hero of their own story. That's not an answer. No, Lucas said, working on the wound with gentle efficiency. It's not. Wade winced as the antiseptic touched raw flesh. Belle's not going to make it alone. Even with your dog, she doesn't know these mountains. Rhodes knows them. He'll keep her moving in the right direction. And if they catch her before she reaches help, Lucas didn't answer. They both knew what that would mean. I have to go after her, Wade said, trying to push himself up. You can barely walk. I don't care. Sergeant. Lucas pressed him back down, firm but not rough. Her name is Isabel Hart. She's 28 years old. She joined the force because her sister disappeared 8 years ago and nobody looked for her. Nobody cared. Wade's voice cracked. She's been fighting her whole life for girls like Grace, and I sent her into those woods alone. Lucas sat back on his heels. He'd heard that tone before in Afghanistan when men talked about the people they couldn't save, the weight that never lifted. You didn't send her, I did. Same difference. No, it's not. Lucas stood and offered his hand. I've lost people, Wade, people I was supposed to protect. The guilt doesn't go away, but it doesn't have to be the end either. Wade took the hand and let Lucas pull him to his feet. What do you mean? I mean, we're not done yet. Hart has the evidence, but we have something too. We have Morrison's desperation. Men who are desperate make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? He threatened me, said there was nowhere in the state I could hide. That means he's scared of what happens if this goes federal. Local corruption can be contained. Federal investigation can't. Wade's eyes sharpened despite his injury. The FBI field office in Denver. If we could reach them directly, we'd need proof, more than Hart's photographs. The ledger she found, there might be copies. Where the mine shaft, Blackwell shaft, where they're holding the victims. Lucas shook his head. That's suicide. Morrison will have men positioned there now. Not if he thinks we're running the other direction. Not if he's focused entirely on catching Bell. The logic was sound in a desperate, insane kind of way. Morrison had committed his resources to the chase. The operation itself might be vulnerable. You can barely stand, Lucas repeated. I stood up when it mattered just now, didn't I? That was adrenaline. Then I'll find more adrenaline. Wade pushed himself off the wall, testing his balance. His legs held, barely. Brennan, I've spent 24 years being a good soldier, following orders, trusting the system. And the system was rotten the whole time. I can't undo that. But I can do something now. Lucas studied the man in front of him, beaten, bloody, exhausted, but not broken. Something in his eyes had hardened into resolution. If we do this, Lucas said slowly, we do it my way. You follow my lead. You don't argue. You don't play hero. Understood. Understood. And when this is over, if we survive, you tell Belle the truth. Wade frowned. What truth? I saw how you look at her. She deserves to know. Color rose in Wade's pale face. That's not we're professionals. It's not appropriate. Neither is dying with things unsaid. Lucas retrieved his tactical vest and began checking gear. I learned that the hard way. Don't make the same mistake. Wade was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was raw. She's the best partner I've ever had. The bravest person I know. And every day I've watched her chase justice for those missing women while I stayed safe behind my desk, I've felt like a coward. Then stop feeling and start moving. We've got about 2 hours before dawn. That's our window. Lucas handed Wade a tactical flashlight, a handheld radio useless with the jammer active but potentially valuable later, and a backup pistol. Can you shoot with that hand? Wade flexed his fingers. They moved through not smoothly. Enough. Enough will have to do. They moved to the back door, the same one Hart and Rhodes had slipped through minutes ago. The rain had lessened to a steady drizzle, and through the clouds, Lucas could see the first hints of moonlight. The mine is 8 miles northeast, Wade said. Old logging roads most of the way, but the last 2 miles are rough terrain. I know a shortcut through Miller's Canyon. Cuts 3 miles off if you can handle the climb. I can handle it. Lucas opened the door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and distant smoke. Wade, the sergeant's hand caught his arm. Why are you doing this? You don't know us. You don't owe us anything. Lucas looked out into the darkness toward the mountains he'd called home for 5 years. The quiet he'd sought, the peace he'd never quite found. A year after I left the service, I read about a girl who went missing from a town just like this one. 15 years old. The investigation went cold in a week. Nobody cared enough to keep looking. What happened to her? I don't know, that's the point. Lucas stepped out into the night. Maybe tonight we find out what happened to all of them. They moved into the forest, leaving behind the damaged cabin with its shattered windows and smoke-stained walls. Above them, the storm continued to retreat, And somewhere in the darkness ahead, both Hart and the answers they sought waited to be found. Belle's lungs burned as she scrambled down the rocky slope toward Cooper Creek. Rhodes moved ahead of her, his dark form barely visible against the trees, pausing every few seconds to check that she still followed. The dog was incredible. Every time she stumbled, he was there pressing against her leg to steady her. Every time she hesitated at a fork in the trail, he chose the path without hesitation. But they weren't alone. She could hear them now, voices calling to each other through the forest flashlight beams, sweeping the slopes above her position. They'd found her trail faster than she'd hoped. Rhodes suddenly froze. His ears flattened, and a low warning growl rumbled in his chest. Belle dropped behind a fallen log, pressing herself into the mud and leaves. Through the branches, she could see a flashlight beam cutting through the trees maybe 50 yards uphill. "Check the creek bed," a voice called. Male, young, frustrated. "She'll follow the water." They knew. Of course they knew. These were cops trained in pursuit and tracking. Running to the creek had been obvious. Rhodes's nose touched her hand. He tugged gently at her sleeve, pulling her toward a dense thicket of brush she would never have noticed on her own. She crawled after him, branches scratching her face, thorns tearing at her jacket. The space was tight, claustrophobic, but it opened into a small, natural hollow beneath an ancient pine's root system. Rhodes pressed against her, his warmth the only comfort in the cold darkness. His breathing had slowed, controlled and silent, as if he understood the need for absolute quiet. Footsteps approached, heavy boots on wet leaves. The flashlight beam swept directly over their hiding spot, lighting up the branches above Belle's head. She stopped breathing. "Nothing here," the voice said. "She must have gone further downstream." "Keep looking. Morrison wants her found before dawn." The footsteps moved on. The voices faded. Belle counted to 60 before she let herself breathe again. "Good boy," she whispered against Rhodes's ear. Good boy." The dog's tail thumped once against her leg. She pulled out her phone and checked the screen. Still no signal. The jammer's range was wider than Lucas had estimated. She'd have to keep moving, get further from the cabin before she could call for help. But the pursuers were ahead of her now, between her and the logging road. The obvious path was blocked. Belle looked at Rhodes. The dog met her eyes with that uncanny intelligence she'd noticed from the moment they met. "Is there another way?" Rhodes rose and moved toward the opposite end of the hollow. He paused at the edge, looking back at her. Waiting. Another way. Deeper into the wilderness, away from the roads and the phones and any hope of quick rescue. Belle thought about Tom, wounded and fighting back at the cabin. She thought about Lucas, a stranger who had risked everything to help them. She thought about the women in those photographs taken from their families, shipped like cargo to whatever horrors awaited. She followed the dog into the darkness. The path Rhodes chose led Belle through terrain that no human would have found in darkness. The dog moved with absolute certainty, weaving between boulders and fallen trees, always staying close enough for her to follow the pale flash of his undercoat. Her legs screamed with exhaustion. Her lungs ached from the cold air. But she kept moving because stopping meant dying. And dying meant those women would never be found. Rhodes suddenly halted. His body went rigid, head low, ears pinned back. Belle froze. She'd learned to trust his warnings. Voices drifted through the trees, close, too close. She couldn't make out words, but she recognized the cadence of men coordinating a search pattern. Rhodes pressed against her leg and guided her sideways off the faint trail and into a gap between two massive boulders. The space was barely wide enough for her shoulders. She squeezed through, feeling rocks scrape against her back, and found herself in a narrow crevice that smelled of damp earth and old leaves. The dog followed his warm bulk, filling the space beside her. Footsteps approached. Heavy, confident, someone who wasn't worried about being heard. "She's not on the creek path," a voice said. Young, impatient. "Maybe the dog took her higher." "Dogs don't think like that." An older voice, calmer. "They follow the path of least resistance. She's somewhere between here and the ridge. Morrison wants her found in the next hour." Morrison can want whatever he wants. These mountains don't care about his timeline. The footsteps paused directly outside the crevice. Belle could see the beam of a flashlight playing across the rocks above her head. One sweep lower and they'd spot the gap. Rhodes's growl built in his chest so low she felt it more than heard it. She pressed her hand against his side, a silent plea for silence. The growl stopped. "Nothing here," the younger voice said. "Let's check the north ridge." The footsteps moved away. The flashlight beam disappeared. Belle counted to 100 before she moved. Her hands shook so badly she could barely grip the rock as she squeezed back out of the crevice. "That was too close," she whispered. Rhodes licked her hand once, then turned and continued up the slope. They had to keep moving. Every minute they stayed still was a minute the net tightened around them. The terrain grew steeper. Belle's boots slipped on wet rock, and twice she would have fallen if Rhodes hadn't braced against her. The dog seemed tireless, but she could see him favoring his left rear leg slightly. The old shrapnel injury Lucas had mentioned. Even heroes had limits. She checked her phone again. Still no signal. The jammer's range was incredible. Military-grade, Lucas had said. What kind of trafficking operation had access to military-grade equipment? The answer hit her like cold water. They weren't just corrupt cops. This operation had connections far beyond local law enforcement. The equipment, the coordination, the way they'd known exactly where to find Tom's tracker, someone with serious resources was protecting this network. Rhodes stopped at the crest of a small ridge and looked back at her. In the faint moonlight breaking through the clouds, she could see his eyes reflecting amber. Which way, boy? The dog turned and began descending the other side. Belle followed, and as she crested the ridge, she saw it. Far below, nestled in a valley, a cluster of lights that didn't belong to any town she knew. Blackwell Shaft, the abandoned mine. Except it clearly wasn't abandoned anymore. She counted vehicles, 4 trucks, 2 SUVs, a van with no windows. Her stomach turned at the sight of that van. This was it, the hub of the operation. And it was crawling with activity, even in the middle of the night. We found it, she breathed. Rhodes, we found it. The dog whined softly. His attention wasn't on the lights below. It was fixed on something behind them, back the way they'd come. Belle turned. 3 flashlight beams were moving along the ridge they'd just crossed, converging on their position. They'd been spotted. Belle ran. Gone was any pretense of stealth. The flashlight beams behind her were gaining, and her only advantage was the head start Rhodes had given her. The dog ran beside her, occasionally darting ahead to check the path, then falling back to guide her around the obstacles she couldn't see. Her lungs burned. Her legs felt like they were filled with sand. But she kept running because somewhere behind those lights were men who would kill her without hesitation. A shot cracked through the air. Then another. The bullets went wide, but the message was clear. They weren't trying to capture her anymore. They were trying to stop her any way they could. Rhodes, faster. The dog surged ahead, leading her down a steep embankment that her rational mind would have refused in daylight. She half ran, half slid, grabbing at roots and branches to control her descent. At the bottom, a creek, shallow, maybe knee-deep, but the current was strong with runoff from the storm. Rhodes splashed through without hesitation. Belle followed, gasping at the cold that stabbed through her boots and up her legs. On the far bank, the terrain opened slightly. She could move faster here, but so could her pursuers. Another shot, closer this time. Bark exploded from a tree trunk 2 feet to her left. "Stop running," a voice bellowed behind her. "You're only making this harder." She didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The evidence on her phone was the only thing that mattered now. Rhodes suddenly veered left away from the path she'd been following. She trusted him and followed. 20 yards later, she understood why. The ground ahead dropped away into a ravine. If she'd kept running straight, she would have gone over the edge in the darkness. The dog had just saved her life again. But the detour cost her time. The flashlight beams were closer now, close enough that she could hear individual footsteps, individual voices. "There, I see her." Belle pushed harder, drawing on reserves she didn't know she had. Rhodes ran beside her, his breathing heavy now, his limp more pronounced. Even he was reaching his limits. The forest thinned. Through the trees, she could see open ground ahead. A meadow, a clearing. Either way, it was a death trap. Open ground meant no cover. She skidded to a stop at the tree line. Rhodes stopped beside her, pressing against her leg. His whine was urgent, conflicted. Behind her, the pursuers closed in. Ahead, nothing but empty space in the mountains beyond. "I don't know what to do," she whispered to the dog. "I don't know where to go." Rhodes looked at her. Then he looked at the meadow, then back at her, and he started walking forward. Not running, walking, calm and deliberate into the open ground. Rhodes, no come back. The dog paused at the edge of the clearing and looked back at her. His eyes seemed to say, "Trust me." She stepped out of the trees. Nothing happened. No shots. No shouts. Just the wind and the distant rumble of thunder. Then she saw why. At the far end of the clearing, barely visible against the dark sky, a structure. A building. And beside it, the angular shape of what could only be a radio tower. A ranger station. An abandoned ranger station with a communications tower. "Oh my God." Belle started running again, fresh hope flooding her exhausted body. Rhodes, you genius. You absolute genius. They crossed the meadow together. Behind them, the first pursuer broke from the tree line and shouted in fury. Belle reached the station and threw herself against the door. Locked. Rusted shut. She slammed her shoulder into it once, twice, three times. The door held. Come on! Come on! Come on! Rhodes circled the building at a run. A moment later, she heard the crash of breaking glass from the back. She followed the sound and found a shattered window. Rhodes stood intent waiting for her. Belle climbed through, ignoring the glass that cut her palms. The station was dusty, abandoned for years, but the equipment was still there. Radio consoles, emergency transmitters, backup power systems. Please work, she prayed. Please, please work. She found the main power switch and threw it. Nothing. She tried again. Still nothing. No, 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 Rhodes barked sharply. He was standing near a generator in the corner, pawing at the fuel tank. Belle rushed over. The tank was empty, but beside it sat 2 jerry cans of emergency fuel. She grabbed one, nearly dropping it with her bleeding hands, and poured fuel into the generator's tank. Footsteps outside, getting closer. She finished pouring and grabbed the generator's pull cord. 1 yank, nothing. 2 yanks, a cough and sputter. The door rattled. Someone was trying to force it open. 3rd yank. The generator roared to life. Lights flickered throughout the station. Equipment hummed. A red light on the radio console turned green. Belle threw herself at the console and grabbed the microphone. Mayday, Mayday. This is Detective Isabel Hart, Colorado State Police badge number 4827. I am at the old ranger station on Miller's Ridge under pursuit by armed suspects. Request immediate assistance. I have evidence of a human trafficking operation involving corrupt law enforcement. Repeat, corrupt law enforcement. I need help. Please someone answer. Static, endless static. Then, Detective Hart, this is Colorado State Patrol, dispatch. We copy your transmission. Confirm your location and situation. Relief flooded through Belle so intensely she nearly collapsed. Old Ranger Station, Miller's Ridge. 11 women being held at Blackwell Shaft Mine. Trafficking ring run by Captain Emmett Morrison Sheriff's Department. Officers involved. Need FBI jurisdiction. The front door burst open. A man stood silhouetted in the doorway. Behind him, 2 others. They raised their weapons. Step away from that radio. Belle keyed the microphone one more time. Blackwell Shaft Mine, 11 women. Send everyone. The lead attacker crossed the room in 3 strides. His hand caught Belle's wrist, twisting the microphone from her grip. She fought back, but he was stronger, trained, ready. His partner moved toward Rhodes. The dog's growl deepened to something primal. Back off or I put the dog down, the man said, weapon trained on Rhodes. No, Belle struggled harder. The gun fired. Rhodes yelped and went down, blood spreading across his left shoulder. His legs buckled and he collapsed onto the dusty floor. Rhodes, Belle screamed. The lead attacker struck her across the face. Pain exploded through her jaw. The world tilted, darkened. Secure her. We're moving. Rough hands zip-tied Belle's wrists behind her back. Through the haze of pain, she saw Rhodes lying motionless on the floor, blood pooling beneath him. Lucas had trusted her with his partner, his family, and she'd failed him. They dragged her toward the door. Her last view before they threw her into the van was Rhodes's still form, amber eyes closed, chest barely moving. The van door slammed shut, and the darkness swallowed everything. Miles away, Lucas and Wade pushed through Miller's Canyon with desperate speed. The sergeant was struggling. His breathing came in ragged gasps, and twice Lucas had to catch him when his legs buckled. We need to stop, Wade wheezed. We can't. 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. Every minute we stop is a minute Hart doesn't have. Wade grabbed Lucas's arm, forcing him to halt. If I collapse out here, you'll have to leave me. Is that what you want? Lucas looked at the man, pale-faced, blood-soaked bandage eyes that were starting to lose focus. Wade was right. Pushing him to death served no one. 3 minutes. Sit on that rock. Drink water. Wade slumped onto the boulder and pulled out the water bottle Lucas had given him. His hands trembled as he raised it to his lips. Tell me about Grace, Lucas said. Wade looked up, surprised. What? You said Belle joined the force because her sister disappeared. What happened? Grace Hart. Wade's voice softened. 18 years old, worked at a diner near the highway. One night she didn't come home. Nobody saw anything. No witnesses, no leads, no body. When was this? 8 years ago. Belle was still in high school. She watched her parents fall apart. Watched the police give up after 2 weeks. Something broke in her that day, and something else got forged. That's why she took this case. She didn't take it. She made it. Wade shook his head. The first disappearance happened 6 months ago. A waitress from a truck stop. Nobody cared. But Belle noticed. She started connecting dots nobody else was looking at. Young women, vulnerable women, all within a 100-mile radius. All gone without a trace. And the department ignored her. Worse, they told her to drop it. Said she was wasting resources on runaways and drifters. Wade's jaw tightened. I should have listened to her sooner. I should have pushed back harder. Instead, I just kept my head down like a good soldier. You're not keeping your head down now. No, I'm not. Wade stood testing his legs. They held. 3 minutes is up. Let's move. They continued through the canyon, the terrain gradually leveling out. Lucas's internal clock told him they'd covered about 4 miles. The mine was still another 3 miles ahead, but they were making better time than expected. A sound stopped them both, distant echoing off the rocks. An engine. No multiple engines coming from the direction of the mine. They're mobilizing it, Lucas said. Something's happening. Belle, maybe. Or maybe they're moving the victims before dawn. Wade's face hardened. We have to get there now. They broke into a jog, ignoring the pain, ignoring the exhaustion. The engine sounds grew louder, then began to fade, heading in a different direction. Lucas grabbed Wade's arm and pulled him behind a rock formation. Wait. Headlights appeared on the old logging road below them. A convoy of 3 vehicles moving fast, heading east away from the mine. They're running, Wade said. They're abandoning the operation. No, Lucas watched the vehicles disappear around a bend. Those are pursuit vehicles. They're going after Hart. How do you know? Because that van in the middle, that's a mobile command unit. They're coordinating the hunt from there. Wade stared at the empty road. She led them away. She drew them off. She's smart. She knows the evidence on her phone is the priority. As long as they're chasing her, they're not protecting the mine. But she's giving us a window. Lucas started moving again. We can't waste it. Lucas and Wade reached the mine entrance just as the first rays of dawn touched the eastern peaks. Wade's condition had deteriorated. His face was gray, his steps unsteady, but he refused to stop. They'd approached from the ridge using the higher ground to survey the operation. Morrison had left a skeleton crew, 4 men that Lucas could see, maybe 5. They were loading boxes into the remaining vehicles, moving with frantic urgency. They're destroying evidence, Wade whispered, or moving it. Either way, we're running out of time. Lucas was already planning the approach when a sound made him freeze. A bark, sharp, urgent, coming from somewhere behind them. Rhodes, Lucas breathed. He turned and ran. Lucas reached the ranger station in under 3 minutes, Wade struggling to keep pace behind him. The door hung open, glass crunching under Lucas's boots as he entered. Rhodes lay on his side near the radio console, a pool of blood spreading beneath him. The dog's amber eyes found Lucas' tail thumping weakly against the floor. Still alive. Still fighting. Lucas dropped to his knees, hands already assessing the wound. Easy, boy. Easy. The bullet had caught Rhodes in the left shoulder, the same shoulder that had taken shrapnel in Kandahar. But the shot had been high, missing the major vessels by centimeters. Lucky. Or maybe Rhodes's old injury had shifted bone structure just enough to deflect the worst of it. Is he? Wade appeared in the doorway, breathing hard. He'll live. Lucas pulled emergency medical supplies from his vest, working with the efficiency of someone who'd treated battlefield wounds too many times. But he needs a vet, soon. He packed the wound, applied pressure, wrapped it tight with gauze and athletic tape. Rhodes whined but stayed still, trusting Lucas's hands the way he'd trusted them for 6 years. We have to move, Wade said. Belle's running out of time. Lucas looked at Rhodes. The dog met his eyes with that familiar, stubborn determination. Can you walk? Lucas asked. Rhodes struggled to his feet. His left front leg wouldn't fully bear weight, but he could move, could still fight. Then we finish this, Lucas said, together. They left the station, Lucas supporting Rhodes on the injured side, moving toward the mine where Belle fought alone in the dark. The mine entrance had gaped before them like a mouth waiting to swallow the unwary. Lucas had taken down 3 of the skeleton crew guards with cold efficiency. Wade had provided covering fire, dropping the 4th with a shot that was more luck than skill given his condition. But the 5th guard had gotten off a warning shot before Lucas's knife found him. Inside, the mine alarms were already wailing. They know we're here, Wade said. Good. Creates chaos. Chaos helps us. They entered the tunnels, Rhodes limping between them. The dog's nose worked despite his injury, tracking scents through the damp air. He pulled them left at the first junction, then right, then deeper. He knows where Belle is, Lucas said. They followed the dog deeper into the mountain. Belle's hands were raw and bleeding from sawing the zip tie against sharp rock. The plastic finally gave way with a snap that sent pain shooting through her wrists, but her hands were free. "What are you doing?" Teresa whispered from somewhere in the darkness. "Getting us ready." Belle flexed her fingers, feeling blood return and painful tingles. "When that door opens, we fight." "Fight," a younger voice, Jennifer maybe, hopeless. "They have guns. And we have 11 people who have nothing left to lose." Belle felt along the walls, searching for anything that could be used as a weapon. Her fingers found a loose piece of rock, jagged and heavy. Not much, but something. "What are your names, all of you? I need to know your names." One by one they answered. Teresa, 35, mother of 2 children who were waiting at home. Jennifer, 22, college student with a scholarship and dreams of medical school. Anna, 19, a waitress saving money for culinary school. 8 more voices, each one a person, a story, a life that mattered. Belle committed each name to memory. "Help is coming. I sent a mayday before they caught me. People know we're here now." "They'll kill us before help arrives," Teresa said quietly. "They always said they would." "Not if we're already gone." Belle gripped the rock tighter. "When that door opens, we don't wait. We fight. Eyes, throat, groin, we fight dirty. And we fight together." "Can you do that?" Silence. Then Teresa's voice, stronger now. "Yes." "Yes," Jennifer echoed. One by one the others agreed. The lock rattled. Belle pressed herself against the wall beside the entrance, the sharp rock gripped in her bleeding hand. The other women spread out as best they could in the cramped space, ready. The door swung open, light flooded in, blinding after the darkness. A single guard stepped through. "Time to move." Morrison wants everyone loaded before Belle struck. The rock caught him on the temple with a sickening crack. The guard staggered, and suddenly 11 desperate women were on him like a wave. He went down under their weight, hands grabbed for his weapon. Teresa got it first, her face fierce despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. Belle snatched the guard's keys and radio. "Stay together, follow me." She led them into the tunnel, moving as fast as the weakest could manage. Some of the women were injured. Others were so weak from captivity they could barely walk. But they all kept moving, driven by hope and terror in equal measure. Behind them, more alarms blared. They'd been discovered. "Run!" Belle shouted. "Stay together and run!" The tunnel branched. Belle chose left, following the faint current of fresh air. They had to be getting close to an exit. Gunfire erupted behind them. Bullets sparked off stone. One of the women screamed. Belle spun, raising the guard's weapon. She'd never fired in the field before. All her experience was on the range. But training took over. She aimed center mass and squeezed the trigger. The pursuing guard went down. "Keep moving." Belle turned back to the women. Jennifer had her arm around Anna, half carrying the younger woman. Teresa brought up the rear, the pistol she'd taken steady in her hands despite her shaking. They burst around a corner and nearly collided with another group of guards rushing toward the alarm. Time seemed to slow. Belle saw their weapons coming up, saw the women behind her frozen in terror, saw the end of everything she'd fought for. Then gunfire erupted from behind the guards. They went down, and there, silhouetted against lights from deeper in the mine, was Tom Wade. "Belle," his voice was hoarse. "This way, move." They ran toward him. The women streamed past, and Wade held his position, laying down, covering fire with precision that spoke of decades of training despite his injury. Belle reached him last. "Tom, go." He pushed her forward. "Get them out." More guards appeared. Wade spun, weapon rising, but there were too many. Too close. "Tom, no." He looked at her one last time. His face was pale, blood still streaming from his head wound, but his eyes were clear. At peace, Wade's hand caught Belle's arm, stopping her. His grip was weak, but his eyes held hers. "Belle, listen to me." "Tom, we don't have time." "Always too busy to listen." He smiled, and blood stained his teeth. "You're like Grace that way. Always moving forward, never stopping to hear what people are trying to tell you." More guards appeared at the far end of the tunnel. Seconds, maybe less. "Tom, please." "I love you," Wade said simply. "Have for 3 years. Since is the day you refused to close that first missing persons case everyone else forgot about. Since I watched you fight for someone you'd never met because it was right." Belle's throat closed. "Tom, don't." He released her arm and raised his weapon. "Don't say anything. Just promise me you'll keep fighting. For Grace, for these women, for all the ones still out there." "I promise." "Good." Wade turned toward the approaching guards, over his shoulder without looking back. Coffee would have been nice, though. Then he opened fire. Belle felt hands pulling her backward. Jennifer, Teresa, the women she'd freed. They dragged her away even as Wade's weapon echoed through the tunnel, even as return fire sparked off stone, even as the man who'd loved her in silence gave everything so she could live. The tunnel turned, the gunfire stopped, and Tom Wade was gone. Lucas and Rhodes found Belle 30 seconds later surrounded by 11 terrified women, her face streaked with tears in someone else's blood. Wade, Lucas asked quietly. Belle couldn't speak, could only shake her head. Lucas's jaw tightened. He understood. He'd lost his team the same way watching them die so others could live. The women, he said, all of them, 11, all alive. Then we move. FBI is inbound. I can hear the helicopters. We just need to hold until they arrive. But Morrison was already there, blocking their path to the exit. He had 5 men with him, all armed, all desperate. Detective Hart, Morrison's voice echoed off the stone walls. His face was haggard, his professional mask finally shattered. Your sister begged, just like you're going to beg. Grace was her name, wasn't it? She fought so hard, scratched my face so deep I had to call in sick for a week. Rage flooded through Belle, pure and hot and clarifying. Her weapon rose. Morrison smiled. That's right, get angry, make a mistake. Let me add you to the list. Rhodes moved faster. Despite his injury, the dog launched himself at Morrison with all the fury of a protector who'd seen too many innocents hurt. His jaws closed around Morrison's gun hand. Morrison screamed and went down. His men raised their weapons, but Lucas was already moving. His knife found the first man's throat. His elbow broke the second man's nose. The third man aimed at Lucas's back and Belle shot him. The chaos lasted maybe 20 seconds. When it ended, Morrison was on the ground with Rhodes standing over him, teeth bared at his throat. 3 of his men were dead, 2 had fled, and in the distance, growing louder by the second helicopter, rotors thundered against the dawn sky. FBI tactical teams flooded the mine entrance 30 seconds later. Weapons raised flashlights, cutting through the darkness. Belle stood with the 11 women clustered around her, and she'd never been so grateful to see federal badges in her life. An agent approached, tall professional female. Detective Hart. Yes. Special Agent Lisa Patterson, FBI. We received your transmission. Are these the victims? 11 women, they need medical attention. And then Belle's voice broke. Sergeant Thomas Wade is inside. He held the rear guard so we could escape. He didn't make it. We'll find him, Patterson said gently. We'll bring him home. Morrison struggled against the agent's grip, his face contorted with rage. You think this changes anything? You think arresting me stops what we built? Belle stepped forward, weapon lowered but eyes blazing. You killed my sister, Grace Hart. Say her name. Grace, Morrison's lips twisted into something like a smile. She was nobody, just like all the others, just like you would have been. Lucas's hand caught Belle's arm before she could move. He's trying to make you lose control. Don't give him that. Your sister fought, Morrison continued, his voice dropping. Scratched my face so bad I had to call in sick for a week. First time I realized I needed to be more careful. So really, she taught me how to be better at this. Belle's weapon rose. Her finger found the trigger. Every fiber of her being screamed to end this man who'd taken Grace, who'd destroyed so many families, who wore a badge while running an empire of suffering. Detective Hart, Patterson's voice cut through the rage. He's in federal custody. He's done. I'm not done, Morrison said. This network has been operating for 15 years. You've caught one captain in one county, but the infrastructure, the connections, the people who profit from this, he laughed, they're still out there, and they're watching you right now. Then we'll find them too, Belle said. Her weapon lowered, but her voice carried absolute conviction. Every single one. Morrison's smile faded. For the first time, Belle saw something in his eyes that might have been fear. Take him, Patterson ordered. As the agents dragged Morrison toward the waiting vehicle, he looked back one last time. This is bigger than you know, Detective Hart. Bigger than the FBI. You've started something you can't finish. Watch me, Belle said. The van doors slammed shut. Morrison was gone. 3 hours later, Belle stood in the hospital corridor while doctors worked on Rhodes. Lucas paced outside the surgical suite, his face carved from stone, refusing to sit, refusing to rest. Patterson approached with a tablet. Detective Hart, we need to show you something. Belle forced herself to focus. Her body ached. Her hands were bandaged, but the work wasn't done. Morrison's operation was extensive, Patterson explained. The tablet showed a map with multiple locations marked. We've identified connections to 14 officers across 3 states. Bank records, shipping manifests, communication logs. Your photographs led us to all of it. 14 officers. Bell felt sick. And 23 arrests so far. We're still tracking down the others. Patterson paused. There is something else you should know. The dispatcher who took your Mayday call, Jennifer Reeves, was Morrison's sister-in-law. Bell's blood went cold. She tried to suppress it. She did suppress it, logged your transmission as a prank call, never forwarded it to response teams. Patterson's jaw tightened. But your broadcast went out on multiple frequencies. State Patrol backup channel picked it up independently. A trooper named Lieutenant Sarah Vance. Sarah Vance, Bell's voice cracked. Tom mentioned that name. Morrison reacted when he heard it. Because Lieutenant Vance has been conducting her own quiet investigation for 2 years. She heard your Mayday recognize the corruption signatures and bypassed normal channels entirely. Called FBI Direct. Patterson paused. Without her, Morrison's people would have had another 6 hours to clean up and scatter. Your timing, her instincts, that's what broke this open. Bell felt the weight of how close they'd come to total failure. One honest officer in the right place at the right moment. Where is Lieutenant Vance now? Lucas asked, appearing beside them. Protective custody. The network put a contract out on her within an hour of Morrison's arrest. Patterson's expression hardened. These people aren't just local corruption. They have reach, resources. This goes deeper than one sheriff's department. Then we keep digging, Bell said. There's one more thing, Patterson said carefully. Morrison gave up the location of a secondary site during interrogation, a property he used in the early days of the operation before he got more organized. We sent a forensics team. Bell's chest tightened. You found bodies. 4 sets of remains. Dental records confirmed? Patterson paused. I'm sorry, Detective. One of them was Grace Hart. The world went very still. Bell had known since Teresa spoke Grace's name in that cell, but knowing and hearing were different things. Were there others? 3 more. All young women, all disappeared between 8 and 10 years ago. We're notifying their families now. Bell nodded, couldn't speak, couldn't think. The surgical suite door opened. A veterinarian emerged, still in scrubs. Lucas was at her side in 2 strides. Your dog is stable, the vet said. The bullet missed major vessels. We've cleaned and closed the wound. He'll need rest and restricted activity for 6 weeks, but he should make a full recovery. Lucas's shoulders sagged with relief he'd been holding back for hours. Can I see him? He's still sedated, but yes, follow me. Bell watched Lucas disappear through the doors. Then she turned back to Patterson. The task force you mentioned, I'm in. Patterson nodded. We'll need someone to coordinate with Lieutenant Vance's evidence. You two would work well together. And Lucas, if he's willing, his tactical skills and Rhodes' abilities would be invaluable. Bell looked through the window of the surgical suite. Lucas sat beside a Rhodes' recovery cage, his hand resting on the dog's head, speaking words she couldn't hear. A warrior and his loyal companion, both wounded, both healing, both ready to fight again when called. He'll be willing, Bell said. 6 months later, Bell stood in front of a room full of law enforcement officials, federal agents, and media representatives. Behind her, a display showed photographs of recovered victims, arrested perpetrators, seized evidence. Operation Mountain Shadow has resulted in 47 arrests across 4 states, she announced. Her voice was steady now, confident. We have recovered 19 victims and shut down 3 major trafficking routes. This work continues. Applause filled the room. Camera flashes strobed. In the front row, Lucas sat with Rhodes at his feet. The dog wore a service vest decorated with commendation ribbons, civilian honor, military working dog, distinction, unit citation. Rhodes bore the attention with stoic patience, though his tail wagged when Bell looked his way. Beside Lucas sat Agent Patterson and Supervisory Agent Diane Crawford, the woman who'd built the task force from the ground up. 52 years old, 25 years in the FBI, and no patience for politics or bureaucracy when lives were on the line. After the ceremony, Bell found Lucas and Rhodes in the parking lot. Lucas was loosening his tie with the expression of a man who'd rather face enemy fire than another hour in dress clothes. Good speech, he said. I hate speeches. Couldn't tell. Rhodes pressed against Bell's leg and she scratched behind his ears. The bond between them had deepened over 6 months of working together. The dog had proven invaluable not just for his training, but for his ability to sense danger, to comfort victims, to provide a steady presence when everything else was chaos. Next briefing is Monday, Bell said. Maryland, Nevada operation, similar pattern to Morrison's network. Lucas looked at the mountains visible on the horizon. For a long moment, Bell thought he might refuse. Might say he'd had enough, done enough, given enough. But then Rhodes bumped his hand and Lucas smiled. Just a small thing, barely visible, but real. "I'm in." Bell's phone buzzed. A message from Crawford, Arizona case just broke. Young mother missing 3 days. Local PD requesting task force assistance. She showed Lucas the screen. "How long until wheels up?" he asked. "4 hours. Then we'd better move." They walked toward Lucas's truck together. Rhodes between them, tail wagging, ready for the next mission. Behind them, the sun climbed higher into a clear Colorado sky. Somewhere in Arizona, a mother was missing. A family was waiting. A clock was ticking. But they weren't waiting alone anymore. Because in a federal building in Denver, Agent Crawford was already assembling the team. In hospitals across 3 states, 19 women were rebuilding their lives. In a cemetery on the edge of town, wildflowers marked a grave that would never be forgotten. And on highways cutting through the American West, warriors moved toward their next battle. A former SEAL who'd found his purpose, a detective who'd found her calling, and a K-9 who'd found his pack. Tom Wade's name was engraved on the memorial wall at the sheriff's department alongside other officers who died in the line of duty. But his real monument was the task force he'd helped create with his sacrifice, a team dedicated to finding the lost and bringing them home. Grace Hart's case file was finally closed after 8 years. But her legacy lived on in every victim her sister saved, every network Bell dismantled, every family that got their daughter back. The fight would never end. The darkness would always be there waiting. But so would they. Lucas climbed into the driver's seat. Bell rode shotgun. Rhodes settled between them, his head resting on Bell's lap, warm and solid and alive. "Ready?" Lucas asked. "Always," Bell said. The engine started. The road stretched ahead toward Arizona, toward another fight, toward women waiting in the dark. And as they drove toward the horizon, the last words Tom Wade had ever spoken echoed in Bell's memory. "Coffee would have been nice, though." She smiled through tears. "Yeah, Tom, it would have been." Then she pulled out her phone and opened the case file. Work to do, lives to save, justice to serve. The light had come to the storm, and it wasn't leaving.